Hey guys, so I wanted to jump on here to address this previous video that I did about traditional gender roles. This topic is so heated that just the mere mention of traditional gender roles cause people to develop apoplexy. And what's fascinating to me about it is that it doesn't need to be this way. We are such a country of extremes when we're talking about roles for men and women. Obviously, roles between women and men evolve and change over time based on what's going on in the country in that era, specifically with respect to technology, but other modern conveniences that sort of change things up. So when we talk about, for example, staying home or not, a mom staying home, it's not staying home or going to work. There's a third option, people. There's a whole vast middle ground in there that where most of us live, I should say. Let me say that again, Kelsey. There's a whole vast middle ground there where most mothers live. This is something that's not talked about too often because all we hear in the media is like these extremes, like I'm saying. Most women do not live in those extreme worlds. When couples have kids, that is when the sex differences between them become really super obvious. Up to that point, it's like we're both living very parallel, similar lives, right? We're both working, we're both going to school, we're both just living. Once you throw kids into the equation, everything changes. That's when, and it's not just me noting this from personal experience or from even what I see in my world, but also the data show it. The research shows that that is when those differences show up. And it is then when so many men and women struggle with what their role is supposed to be. Because up until that point, nobody told them, A, that this was going to happen, that those differences are going to become paramount down the line after you have kids, and that your reaction as a mom or a dad to different things revolving around parenting are going to be different. They're thrown. They don't know how to proceed at that point because they didn't have the heads up, because we're supposed to be equal and the same, as in the same, or interchangeable. And of course, we're not. Women have babies and men do not. There's your biggest obvious difference. And that carries with it a whole slew of variables that will exist for women and not for men post-kid, whether it's breastfeeding or early childcare and all of the rest, that nurturing period. Fathers tend to become a lot more indispensable a little bit later. So because we don't discuss this, everything is talked about in terms of extremes, and it makes the conversation very stunted. So the idea that, first of all, just for some numbers here, there's only about 0.25% of married mothers who stay home and do not have jobs or not employed in any way. A quarter, only a quarter. The next quarter, actually it's a little more than a quarter, are women like myself who do both throughout the course of their children's lives. They're moving in and out of the workforce, working part-time, working not at all for a number of years, but mostly part-timers. Part-timers. These are married mothers now, which means if you lump the part-timers or the people who've moved in and out of the workforce as the needs of their children change, like I just upped the ante in a huge way in the last year or two. I'm about to be an empty nester. If you lump that group in with the stay-at-home, full-time, all the time, not employed people, you get half the married mothers in this country. So the idea that you're either doing this or doing that just isn't a realistic or fair assessment of how it needs to go. There are just, between technology and people having fewer children, there are just so many more options. And it just doesn't need to be discussed in that way, in such an extreme way. So when I talk about traditional gender roles, I'm not talking about anything that is strict and inflexible and old school. I'm talking about working with progress I'm talking about marrying progress with human nature. One of those things moves forward, the other one stays still. It's static. So it's our job to figure out how to move with the times while also embracing that which we know works. And what we know works are things like chivalry, are things like appreciating that mothers bring something to the table that fathers do not, and vice versa, fathers bring something that mothers do not, and stop trying to make everybody do the same thing or live the same life. That's really where we get into trouble. So this is a really big subject that causes people to get very defensive. But yeah, I just wanted to jump on here and say it just doesn't have to be so extreme like that. There really is a third option, and millions of us are living it. And that doesn't mean that you throw out, masculine and feminine behavior or masculinity or femininity just because there's some overlap in the roles. That's all I really mean by traditional gender roles. I'm saying don't be so quick to throw them out, but don't also assume that I'm talking about anything that you might imagine in your head from the movies or a Leave It to Beaver scenario or whatever. That's just not it.